Shalom, and welcome back to B'nai Noach Academy, Thoughts on the Torah. Please remember to hit the like button, to subscribe, and most importantly, to share this wisdom and insight with friends and family. When you look in the book of Exodus, chapter 21, verses 35 and 36, this is basically a discussion about a person who owns an animal. In this particular example or instance that's given here in the verse, it's an ox. And this ox does damage. It gores. Now, this is something that's just abnormal. This is not something which is typical for the animal to do. It could do it, but it's not typical. It's not normal. Thus, the Torah is saying that if this happens up to 3 times, then this animal is still innocuous. It's called, in Hebrew, it's called tam, which means that it's not necessarily going to repeat it again. It has not established a pattern of doing so. And therefore, the owner, as much as the owner should watch it and is responsible for it, but then the owner cannot be held absolutely and totally responsible for the damage that this animal did, and therefore he only pays half of the damages. However, once it transgresses from, meaning once it graduates, that's what I was going to say. Once it graduates from being innocuous to being forewarned, to being a mu'at, here is forewarned. It happened 3 times. It has already established a pattern of doing so. In this case, he's fully and absolutely responsible, and he has to pay full damages. Now, the question is, and this is discussed in the Talmud, once an animal has become, quote, a mu'at, a forewarned animal, this ox has become forewarned that it is indeed a dangerous animal, which is susceptible of hurting other animals and causing grave damage, and therefore the owner is totally responsible for it. Question is, could it ever reverse? Could it ever leave that category? In other words, is it always doomed? And the answer is, yes, it can. There are certain circumstances, certain conditions, which could actually reverse its status. And that is, one, the classical example that's given, if it proves itself to no longer be that wild, crazy, uncontrolled animal. Thus, in other words, not non-domesticated. Thus, if, for example, it comes to a point where even little children can play around it in an annoying manner, and it won't react at all, won't get upset, that shows that it's, so to speak, its character has reversed, has changed, has gone back to normal. Or even not to that extreme, but just if its environment was changed. In what manner? It's, let's say it was sold to another person, so now it lives in another location, meaning the location has changed, thus the environment has changed. Now it reverts back, it springs back like a reset almost to an original status that it would have had as any other normal animal. Now this, like everything else in the Torah, although it's speaking about a specific law, specific case law, specific instances, but the fact is the Torah speaks to everyone, to you, to me, to all of us. Even those of us, for example, myself, who never owned an ox, nor do I have any intention of ever doing so. I don't have a farm, I'm not a farmer. So how does this apply to me? How could I adapt this in my life, at least the lessons, the ideas of it? Well, think about it. Of course, I don't own an ox, but I do have a connection to an ox. You see, each and every one of us has what I would refer to as an animalistic soul. There's a little part of us which is a little animal. Well, that part is not dangerous. It's not inherently dangerous. Sadly, perhaps happens sometimes to us, a decent human being could somehow progress, or I should say degress, into becoming somewhat of a, quote, wild animal. Whereas here it's just a tamed animal, has animalistic instincts, such as, desires of self-gratification and so on, without concern for another, but typically it's of no danger to others. But what happens when that becomes a little more dangerous and precarious for others? And I start behaving in a manner that my character traits are so bad that they are like goring others, hurting others. Question is, could I change? And here is the lesson. The answer is yes. And one of the primary ways that the Torah teaches us how to change is by changing location, changing environment. We are products of our environment. In other words, as human beings, we learn from our surroundings. We pick things up. It's not only children who learn from their environment, even as adults. Well, once again, there's always a little child in us, and we pick things up. We become conditioned by our environment. We become conditioned not only if we were to be happy and content and satisfied with life, but even the way we behave, the way we react, the way we talk, the way we express ourselves is conditioned by the TV stations we watch, by the news that we take in, by the environment, by the people we hang out with, and so on and so forth. Thus, the lesson over here is, of course, we all have a little ox in us. We have a little tamed ox in normal conditions, in normal circumstances. But when we allow that ox to be exposed to a bad environment, it could become a goring one. It could become a hurtful one to others. And thus, what the Torah is teaching us, to become reset, so to speak, reverse back to a normal, proper, innocuous animal, or the animal that's within us, please change your environment. Look for better people to hang out with. Look for better inspiration. Look for an environment which is more conducive for being a better person, a kinder person, a more godly person.